Hey, what is up, YouTube? It is the Dual Threat Podcast, your daily news source for all things sports. My name is Drew.
And I'm Jacob. Let's get into it.
All right, let's go. This is the DT poll. As y'all know, the AP poll. It doesn't get it right, so we're going to tell y'all what it actually is right. We've both got our own polls here, as you can see from our 21 through 25 right here. Jacob, why don't you start us off with your 25 choice here?
Yes, sir. The dual threat poll, the DT poll coming in spicy. If you saw the last video, I'm in love with Kansas right now, and I think they should be ranked. I think it's a no doubter they'll be ranked if they beat Duke and go 4-0 this week, but I'm putting them in anyway. That's all I'm saying. What about you, Drew?
Hey, that's fair, man. I saw Kansas did get a few votes for AP as well. I believe it was in the 30s. So they are, they're sneaky good. Also scoring the most points per game offensively, I believe, in the country right now. I've got Florida State. I think just because it was LSU's first game, I think that game is really underrated right now. Florida State should have won that game anyways, and then gave it to LSU, and still somehow won. I mean, that was a crazy game, but Florida State just keeps finding a way to win. Their quarterback did just get hurt, but they still pulled out the win against Louisville. So I've got them ranked right now at 25, and at number 24, I've got Ole Miss. I think they're sneaky good, but my problem with them, I mean, they've been beating out of bad teams, which you're supposed to do. Um, Especially as an SEC school that just won 10 games last year. But my problem is they haven't played anybody. I mean, they just beat Georgia Tech like 50-0, but which is still impressive. So that's why I have them ranked. But I would just like to see them against some competition. So I've got them at 24.
Hey, that's fair. That's fair. I have Ole Miss a little higher, but I think I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. All right. Well, 24, you see it. I got App State. Listen, I know. This is hot. This is spicy. Okay. I get it. But App State hung in there and almost beat UNC looked bad, but they've kind of looked okay recently. Listen. They beat Texas A&M, who went and beat number 13 Miami at the time. Texas A&M plays Arkansas. We'll really see how this is going to shake out. They won on a miracle game against Troy. Listen, I get it. I get all the questions, the apprehensions, but I don't know. There's something special brewing in Boone, and that's all I'm saying. Next up, we got Miami. Not much to say. Their offense looked actually okay, but just could not finish against Texas A&M. If they convert some of those for touchdowns, though, they win that game easily. So um, you got to keep them in because I do think they're a pretty solid team. But after that loss, you got to drop them a decent amount.
Yeah, I believe Miami had 500 yards against A&M to A&M's like 300. A&M found a way to win that game. They needed to, but Miami's offense did look good. Had a few drops that if they caught it, they probably would have won that game. For mine, I've got Utah right now. I think that game against Florida, you're playing in the swamp. It's early in the year. That a lot of people watched that game and threw Utah out of the Pac-12 race entirely, and I feel like we should just slow our roll here. A lot of people after that game thought Anthony Richardson was a Heisman candidate. Obviously, he hasn't looked that good since then, but I think Utah is a sneaky good team. They're very physical on the trenches, like built like an SEC team, and so I feel like that in the Pac-12 can do a lot of good for them. And so they've got a lot of games that can prove themselves this year. And I'm looking at Utah versus USC. They've got them at home in just a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to that game. I've actually only got Miami one more spot up than you. They've got a young wide receiver core, so they a lot of those drop balls is probably because of that. I mean, they had those problems in the spring game as well. Tyler Van Dyke played very well against A&M, probably good enough to win, but because of those drop balls, they came out with an L at Kyle Field, which is probably one of the hardest places to play in the country. And what about you? Who do you got at 22?
Yep, like just kind of like Kansas. If you watched our video on Tuesday, I feel the exact same way about Minnesota. Nothing has changed. I do think they're going to go in and stomp Michigan State and put the world on notice. So I have them at number 22. I think they're legit, and I think they're legit. Honestly, Big Ten championship contenders. I don't think they're going to compete with Ohio State, but I think they can win the West pretty easily. and uh, and compete for the Big Ten championship. 21, I got BYU. Listen, they looked okay earlier in the season, and then they go out and just get steamrolled by an Oregon team that I don't think's that good. I don't even have them ranked. I don't think. Um, which I that may be a hot take. That may be a hot take, but I think Bo Nix is bad. I think we see the same thing with Bo Nix every year, and I don't like him at all. So yeah, that may be a hot take. Maybe Oregon should be in over App State. App State, they're magical. Oregon's not. Oregon's just meh. Yeah. No one likes Oregon. I love App State. I'm putting them in.
All right, then. There you go. All right. At my 21, this may be a hot take as of right now. I've got Texas. It actually might not be a hot take just because I believe that's where the AP poll has them around. But right now, the only reason why I don't have them in the teens area is because of that quarterback situation. Quinn Ewers is still out. I know he's coming back sooner than expected. I don't think he's going to play this weekend. I think he'll play against West Virginia. But my thing is, yes, they played well against Alabama. They still lost the game, a game they should have won, I believe. And the thing is with Hudson Card behind center, I don't know how confident I am, especially against Texas Tech this weekend. You're under a touchdown favorite playing in Lubbock. We're going to see how that game goes. I think Texas wins that one, but that's going to be tough. I think that's going to be a real defensive challenge for Texas, and I really want to see what's going on there after that weekend. All right, so the next page here at 20, I've actually got Florida. I dropped them down. They didn't look great against South Florida, and their quarterback throwing 2 interceptions. I was a big Anthony Richardson fan, but he has looked more like a running back than a quarterback. He hasn't thrown for a touchdown this season, and it's starting to show me a lot of problems. I'm looking forward to their game against Tennessee. I think Tennessee might blow them out there. It might get pretty ugly. Who do you got at 20, Jacob?
I got Utah. It's kind of the same thing you said. Plays like an SEC team, and that plays in the Pac-12 for sure. I don't think they're anywhere. I don't think they're sniffing the boots of USC. But I do think compared to the rest of the Pac-12, they're for sure one of the best teams. And just overall, they might be able to hang with USC kind of till halftime. But I think second half they'll blow it open. Next up, I got A&M. Maybe a little lower, a little higher than AP poll, a little lower than you. Their offense is pretty bad. I mean, there's really no way to put it. Even a game they beat Miami, they score 17 points. They score 17 against App State, 31 against Sam Houston. It's like, I thought they were supposed to be one of the 6 best teams in the country. Granted, their defense plays. They had a lot of guys out on offense, so I'm not knocking them too hard. I still think they're a pretty solid team, but we got to see it. Like this, in my opinion, this is make or break week. If you lose to Arkansas, like that's pretty much the season right there.
That's fair. So in your place, where you have Texas A&M, I actually have NC State. A lot of people have them ranked higher. I'm not sold on them completely yet. I watched that game against East Carolina, a game they should have easily lost. East Carolina was handed the game on a platter and just didn't want to take it. And I don't know. I'm not sold on them yet. I need to watch some more of their games. Granted, I haven't watched since that Week 1 game. But I haven't really I didn't like what I saw. And I was told that they were supposed to be an ACC contender. But I haven't seen it yet. So next up, I've got Wake Forest. They're winning their games. That's really why I'm putting them up. Haven't really played anybody, but they're winning their games, so can't complain. So that's where I'm going to put them.
All right, 18. I got Texas a little bit higher up the ranks than you. My thing was, I agree with if Hudson Card's playing, I do not feel confident about them. If they can get through Texas Tech though, and Quinn comes back, my one reservation about them is pretty much gone, and so I don't see a reason why they can't. I mean, he looked great against Alabama. I don't see a reason why if he comes back sooner sooner than expected. Sooner,
Pun
pun intended.
intended. Hmm.
They can't compete with Oklahoma, beat Oklahoma. I mean, they might have trouble with Kansas to win the Big 12, but they definitely, I think, can run through Oklahoma and with Quinn. But Kansas is kind of looking like a buzzsaw right now, if you ask me, in my opinion. Next up, Florida. Same things you said. Anthony Richardson not throwing a touchdown pass yet. For sure concerning. The team looks good, though. Typical Florida. Good defense, good rushing, and they're just finding ways to win, even if they can't just throw for 500 yards, you know? And so we'll see. We'll see how it works. They lost to Kentucky, so they're dropping a little bit, but I still think they're a pretty solid team all around.
Yeah, I agree. They're really physical, and I think my biggest problem with them is depth. They don't have a lot um, at any position really, and so if a big injury were to come, obviously we're not going to predict that that does, but if it would, um, that would not be good for Florida. All right, in 17, I've got Texas A&M again. Back to what you said, their offense has been atrocious. I mean, you're going to score 14 points against App State, who UNC put up, half of triple digits on, and it's concerning to see. I think their defense is, their defense won the game against Miami. Anytime you're going to hold a team under, 20 points or even 10 points, you should win that game every time, especially in college football nowadays. Max Johnson, I think, looks like a better quarterback than Haynes King did. He looks more like a game manager to me. I know they were missing a couple of wide receivers as well from the suspension, who I will give credit to Jimbo Fisher for, because this was really a must-win game. And a lot of coaches, I believe, would have turned the other cheek and let those people play. But he still met up with the team and told them, came up with a punishment for them and stuck to it, even though this was a must-win situation. So I'll respect him for that. Next up, number 16, I've got Baylor. Baylor has looked great, except for their close loss to BYU at BYU. BYU is a solid team, I believe. I have them ranked one right above just because they beat them. I think BYU just had an off week and played a Bo Nix that you see once a year. I mean, you saw him one time against Oregon his freshman year, sophomore year against Alabama, and senior year it just happened to be against BYU. And so I think there's a one-time shine Bo Nix every single year, and I think BYU just happened to get it, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Baylor looks good. Dave Aranda, great coach, love him. Turned a 2-10 program into the Big 12 champions, and I still think they're in the running for the Big 12. So I've got them at 16.
Yep, 16. I got Washington. A little lower than you. I think the Michigan State team wasn't as good as everybody thinks, but they're 3-0. You got to give them credit. I honestly, if it's really a record thing why they're above Utah. I think Utah would win and will win when they play. But they're 3-0. Utah's 2-1. That's kind of how these things go. And so yeah, personally, I think they're okay. I don't think they're a crazy top team, but you got to put them relatively high after a big win like that. Baylor's up next. All the same stuff you talked about. The tough loss, but a big bounce back. You go in and you lose a tight one to BYU by 6, and then you come back and you smash Texas State by 35. Like, that's what you want to see out of a top 15 team, and that's exactly what Baylor did.
That's right. And just like what I was talking about earlier, I've got BYU. I think they're a good team. They're really physical, and I think they'll bounce back. They've got a tough schedule this year. They're playing Arkansas later in the year, and I think that'll really show us, what those two teams look like. But yeah, I've got them at 15, and then number 14, I've got Oregon, just because of that head-to-head win. I'm not impressed with Oregon whatsoever. They got smoked by Georgia, but then again, who doesn't? I'm not sold on Oregon. I have them there just because they beat BYU pretty badly. But I also think Bo Nix is the most inconsistent quarterback probably in college football. And when he is not inconsistent, he's just bad. So I think he's always been that way. He was like that at Auburn as well. So I've got them there for now, but I expect Oregon to drop one or two more to teams that they shouldn't, like they do every single year.
Yep. 14, I got NC State. I kind of agree. I don't know how good they're gonna be. The ACC is pretty weak though, so I mean, I could definitely see them putting up a decent win total. But I just, I mean, even if they did do something crazy in the ACC, like it doesn't matter. Even Clemson's not playing great this year. Like there's not much there to test them. So for now, have them up here. But honestly, this college football season, it feels like there's a lot of discrepancy between the top, um, well, really the top like three teams, and then but even so, even more so like top 10, top 12, and then some guys that are just 3-0, so you got to have them kind of high. Ole Miss, I'm pretty significantly higher on than you. I think they've looked relatively decent. Offense is firing with the new coach. You sometimes you think, and you give, honestly, sometimes we give some lenience to teams that are maybe not showing up as good and not playing as great with the new quarterback. And Ole Miss is coming out and just, aside from a week one game against Troy, only winning by 18, which they played well against App State. But they've just destroyed their last two opponents, and I can't imagine it's going to be much different against Tulsa. They play Kentucky week 8, and so that's really going to be the test, right? That's going to be the one where it's like, is Ole Miss legit or is Kentucky legit? And we'll see. But I think they're a little bit better than consensus, and I think that um, I don't know. I think they could do something crazy if the SEC West shook out in a weird way.
Right. Yeah, just kind of going back to what you were saying, like my 5 through really 20 just could all be shuffled because it's like 1 through 4 is like maybe a 7 point spread between 1 and 4. But between 8 or 6 and 20 is probably a 3 or 4 point spread. Like I feel like anybody could just compete with anybody this year that's not outside that top tier. And college football has kind of always been like that, but I feel like this year especially. And Georgia may even be in a tier above everybody else, miles and miles ahead. We'll just have to see once Georgia starts SEC play. They beat South Carolina pretty bad, and that's why I've got Washington here. I mean, they're 3-0. They had a ranked win before Michigan State was unranked, so it's like, well, that's kind of a ranked win. They're the reason why they're no longer ranked. So I've got them at 15, or I'm sorry, I've got them at 13. They're, ranked win, undefeated so far. Haven't really been tested up to this point. Next up, Tennessee. I've got them ranked a lot lower than the AP poll, I believe. I believe they're at 8. I've got them at 12. This weekend will be really their first test, playing against Florida. They get them at home, luckily. Game day, it's going to be a great atmosphere as usual. But I'm not sold on Hendon Hooker, to be completely honest with you. I mean, he was supposed to be a Heisman favorite this year, one of the top ones. And I look at Stetson Bennett, I look at Bryce Young, I look at C.J. Stroud, and that was the level of playing I was told that I would get from Hendon Hooker, and I just haven't seen it yet. So I've got them at 12.
Yep. 12, I got Penn State. They After that absolutely dominant win against Auburn, I could see myself putting them a little higher, but I just there's a lot of good teams above them. Auburn hasn't looked like the Auburn of old necessarily this season, so I'm not in any rush to put them crazy high, but I definitely think that was an important win, and if they continue to play well and play Michigan well in a couple weeks, then we'll come back and revisit that. Next up, Tennessee. Tennessee was actually 11 in the AP poll, so you weren't that low on them. But I agree, it does kind of feel like Hendon Hooker's spending more of his time making podcasts than actually coming out and playing football
and stealing our name.
But Tennessee's good. Tennessee's not great. They're a fringe top 10 team, but realistically, if you're putting them against Georgia or Kentucky in the East, throwing Alabama for the whole SEC, it's like they're not probably competing with those teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, number 11, I've got Oklahoma State. This is probably my most underrated team, to be honest with you. I think if I were to do this poll over again, I think I'd rate them a little bit higher. I think this team is sneaky good. Nobody's really talking about them, but I think out of, the Big 12 to me is pretty open, and I could see Oklahoma State running this thing and winning it. Spencer Sanders has looked, decent enough to start them as a 3-0 start, and I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes with continued play there. Next up, we have the same team here. I believe this is the only one up to this point, and this is Kentucky.
Hmm.
They have a win over Florida in the Swamp. Very impressive win, I believe. Florida made a lot of mistakes in that game, though. And they were forced ones, though. I'll give Kentucky that. But honestly, I think this is the team that AP poll actually has at 8, and I'm not ready to put them up that high yet. I think there are teams that are better than them. I mean, if Arkansas and Kentucky are playing tomorrow, I'm taking Arkansas to win that game. So I've got Kentucky there.
Yep, it's pretty much all the same. I think they got a good defense. I think their quarterback, um, he, I mean, he's good. I think I don't know. They're not kind of like the flashy, fun team to pick like some of these USC's and Oklahomas that we'll get to. But they are solid and they're playing well. They're playing good football right now. So there's not a whole lot of bad you can say about a top 10 team. Oklahoma State, I have a little higher than you. I just think um, it's kind of like been the same thing for the Big 12 the last, I don't know, really 3-4 years. Um, Baylor can win, Oklahoma State can win, OU can win. Like really, like it feels pretty open. OU, they dominated for a little bit with Lincoln Riley, and then like kind of near the end, Baylor was kind of getting in there, and then last year it was Baylor, Oklahoma State in the championship. I don't know. It just seems like unless there's a dominant team in the Big 12, which I don't think there is, that Oklahoma State has a chance. And I think they're playing good football right now, and they really could come out on top in the Big 12. Aside, of course, from Kansas, they would have to beat that powerhouse, that juggernaut, which I don't think they will, but they might.
There you go, Kansas to win the Big 12. Number 9, I got Arkansas. Their secondary has looked bad. Granted, these teams have been the teams that Arkansas have been playing have been down, and so they're throwing a lot more than running. So those stats may be a little bit skewed, but they're still letting up 400 yards. And, we're going to see this weekend, especially, we're going to see what's worse, A&M's offense or Arkansas's secondary. And I don't know if A&M's going to have enough time to throw the ball with that offensive line because Arkansas's defensive line is very solid. But then again, I think any of A&M's wide receivers, especially the ones that were suspended, Evan Stewart is what I'm thinking of right now, probably could get downfield wide open every single play with that secondary. So we're going to see how that goes. Number 8, I've got Penn State. I think their win against Auburn is very underrated. They played at Auburn. Yes, Auburn is not exactly who they've been in the past. TJ Finley isn't the best quarterback, and their defensive line is really not as powerful as has been in the past. I mean, I think Brian Harsin is probably as good as gone, but I think that was a solid win. I mean, they just destroyed them, beat them. The crowd was empty by the fourth quarter, and that's a very rare thing to do in the SEC West. So I'll give Penn State credit right now. They've got a long road ahead of them though in the Big Ten, and they've got a lot of big games coming up real soon. So we're gonna see how that goes.
Yep. Yep. All right. I have Arkansas one spot higher than you. Pretty much all the same stuff. Their secondary does look rough right now, but I think I have them a little. They're 10 in the AP poll. I think I kind of have them a little higher because I'm expecting a win over A&M, and I think we'll be talking about. Listen, I know it's early and you hear a lot of random stuff, but I think if I were going to pick a long shot to win the Heisman, right? Because there's a lot of favorites and there's only so many guys that are actually going to be in contention. But if Arkansas does something crazy, goes on and wins the West, SEC West, beats Alabama, I think by the end of the season we'll be talking about KJ Jefferson in that conversation for the Heisman. But time will tell. They have to beat a kind of underperforming but definitely could bounce back team in Texas A&M this week. Next up, I got Michigan. They're 4 in the AP poll. I think that's a little overrated only because the 3 teams they've played are like 3 of some of the worst teams in college football. Hawaii is horrible. UConn is horrible. Colorado State is horrible. It's like, no offense if you go there and or are a fan, but like, let's be real, you know. I don't think they're bad by any stretch of the word. I just think I'd like to see them play a tiny bit better competition before I move them above any of the teams that are ahead of them.
That's fair. Number 7, I got Clemson, just one spot behind you. I believe they are A&M 2.0. They have a terrible offense. Their defense is good enough to keep them in games. The only reason why I have Clemson this high is because they're still undefeated, and preseason rankings, this is where they are. I think they have a lot of potential. I think A&M also has a lot of potential, but A&M lost, so I have to move them down. I think if Clemson gets it together, they can be a top 10 team easily. They have the talent for it for sure, but I don't think DJ Ngongole, sorry if I say that incorrectly, is the guy. I think Cade Klubnik needs to be the starter this weekend, and it seems like Dabo doesn't want to go to that point, and I don't really understand why, but I think that offense has clicked a lot more when we've seen him in the plays that we've got to see him in, and I don't know. I expect a quarterback change, but for now, I've got them at 7. Their defense has looked good. Their run game has been a little bit better, but number 6, I've got OU. As I spoke about in my last video, I think their offense is maybe just a little bit overrated. So I think I only have them one spot below what they are in the AP poll. This may be where they are in the AP. I don't remember. But I think their defense has looked very good. I mean, with Venables, that's what they need to be focusing on, especially before they go to the SEC. I think it was a good hire for when they get there to have a defensive-minded coach. But they've looked good so far. They've really haven't had a challenge yet. They've played a wounded bird in Nebraska and just some other garbage teams, but I've got them at 6 right now, and they're playing. I think is it West Virginia this weekend as a 13-point favorite.
No, West Virginia plays Virginia Tech.
Oh, that's right. They're actually playing right now.
Oklahoma plays Kansas State.
That's right. As a 13-point favorite, I believe that opened at 11, so it looks like the betting odds are in OU's favor. All right, who do you got, Jacob?
I got Clemson, pretty much all the same stuff you said. I have them a little bit higher because I can't see a world where they don't win the ACC, and an ACC championship, even if Clemson doesn't look great, probably means a championship, or not a championship, a college football playoff appearance. So I got to keep them pretty high. Klubnik has looked better. They're probably not going to play the true freshman unless it really comes to it, but they did it with Trevor Lawrence, so who knows. OU, I agree. I think their defense looks good. I personally think their offense looks a little – I'm taking a little more stake in it than you are. But we will see come these next couple weeks, Kansas State, TCU, Texas. We'll see what they're actually made of. Yeah.
All right, number 5, I've got Michigan. And as you can see, we're all lined up at the top here. But for Michigan, same things. Haven't played anybody. Garbage teams. We'll see how they do in Big Ten. Right now, I've got them at 5 just because, they've beat the crap out of everybody they've played, and they've got a really solid roster there, and nice quarterback battle. I believe one of them got hurt, though. But all right, number 4, I've got USC, as you do. I am really bought into their offense. I know by what you said that you're not quite as bought into this team yet from the undervalued or the underrated. Is that what it was? But I believe Lincoln Riley has brought Oklahoma to California, and Oklahoma dominated the Big 12 with Lincoln Riley, and the Pac-12 is worse than the Big 12. I don't see how the USC doesn't, start to run that Pac-12, especially their division. I think their only competition this year is Utah, and they play at Utah, so that'll be probably the only game that USC will be under a touchdown favorite besides this Oregon State game, which I personally think USC is kind of a lock for. But yeah, I got them at 4. I think they've looked really good.
Yep. We'll see. We'll see how they stand up to test later in the season about their defense, but their offense is probably better than any other team on this list. So, Ohio State at number 3. I mean, there's nothing bad to say about them. Kind of the same thing. Kind of the same vibe, I think, as USC. I think they have a really good offense. Defense, we'll see. But they definitely have a harder regular season playing Michigan and Penn State and Michigan State. So I think they'll be tested earlier. So as long as they can pass all those tests, I think they'll be fine. USC, I just don't know if they'll be tested until the playoff, and by that time it might be too late.
Right. I've got Ohio State as well. I think their offense looks really good. The problem is, I don't think their offense is better than they were last year. They lost their two best weapons, I believe, in Garrett Wilson and remind me of the last guy. Started with an O. Olave. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba. A lot of people believed him to be that guy that's going to step up, and he doesn't even have the most receiving yards, receptions, touchdowns, any of that. So it seems like that's not even his role this year either. But number two, I've got Alabama. Struggled against Texas at Texas. This looked very similar to last year. Alabama playing in environments that are very, everybody's going to come to play Alabama the best way that they can. And that's why I didn't rank Texas so high, is because, A&M beat them last year. They were a 4-loss team. Florida played them very close. They were a 5-loss team. It just seems like Alabama, maybe because they were so young last year is what I believed. But this year, I mean, it still looks like they may struggle on the road, but we're going to have to see how that goes.
Yep, totally agree. Alabama, they don't look the same for some reason. They lose all their talent before they just reload, but haven't been able to do that. We'll see. It's still Nick Saban. It's still Bryce Young. They're going to be fine. We'll just see down the stretch late in the season how they finish. Up at the top, we both have Georgia. They're dominating. They feel like the Alabama of old right now. Not comparing the two. Obviously the dynasties are nowhere similar. I'm just saying Georgia loses their whole team. They come back. Offensively seem better than last year. Defensively seem just as good. Can't imagine any other team other than them are going to be at the top by the end of the season. At least going into the playoff, once you get there, crazy stuff can happen. But I think they're going to be undefeated through the SEC championship, and they just look dominant right now.
I agree. I mean, I don't see anybody on their schedule stopping them as of this point, maybe in the SEC championship. But, I mean, as we know, that's basically a home game for them in Georgia. It's pretty crazy that they lose all that talent and reload just like Nick Saban and Alabama used to do. It doesn't really look like they are this year, as like you said, but we'll have to see how that pans out. Well, thank y'all for tuning in, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. Jacob, you got anything else for us?
That's it. I hope y'all enjoyed, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.